evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. How you doing today, Mark? Say hello, my friend.
Hello!
Also joined by owner, projectionist, king of the Mahoning, Jeff. Say hello, my friend.
Yowzer.
Now you know what they sound like. Today, we are joined by an old friend of the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. I guess you could say he kind of fell into a tech position over the last season or two, beyond supporter before that, and somebody who is always willing to give us the knowledge. He's been on the podcast before, if you guys have heard. Fellow projectionist, fellow operator, currently indoor and outdoor with the history. 70 millimeter specific. He's part. I don't know if you guys will hear this. He's part of the 70 millimeter special ops. So you'll hear all about that as Bob Weir joins us. Welcome, Bob.
Hello, one and all.
So the 70 millimeter secret ops. Do you have a card, special card carrying member of the club?
No card or no secret handshake or anything like that. It's just that, whenever somebody decides that they want to do a 70 millimeter release, I just get a phone call.
That's just it. We'll get to this, but like that is something that just, it tickles us. So
we were talking about that right before we started, before you came on to the call. And I said to Virgil how you're like a secret agent. Like, we're running a new print of Grand Prix in Istanbul. We need you. And the term I coined was 0070 millimeters. So feel free to use it.
That you drop from a plane with like canisters in hand, with parachuting in.
If you've seen the size of those canisters, he drops fast.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, we're going to talk about all things drive-ins, running theaters, love of drive-ins, and Bob's connection to the theater. So why don't we jump right in? People who might not have heard the last podcast you were on with Mike talking about some of the tech stuff that we did last year to the projectors. Why don't you give people a little bit of insight?
Well, as I mentioned in the last one, I saw the documentary and noticed when they did a pan of the booth that the projectors were different. That's when I decided to see if I could get a hold of Jeff and say, hey, I happen to have a duplicate of the one that's on the left-hand side. Would you be interested in it? And then after conversations and driving up and showing him what I had, we finally came to the deal of being able to literally upgrade both projectors with new lamp houses. And that's how I got started.
And it was a game changer for sure. Well, your connection to us, before that was really being a outspoken supporter. You reached out. Our connection might have been through one of the social medias or the email, but you were always willing to give advice.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't just kind of come out of the blue. What was your history, or is your history, running theaters, indoor or out?
Well, it all started when I was 8 years old.
My backyard theater.
Well, not quite. So one of the local drive-ins that we used to go to was the Pleasant Hill Drive-In, and that was the one that was right up the street from where we used to live. I was 8 years old. My uncle and aunt, we were in their big Buick, and with my cousin and my brother, and we're going to the drive-in. And it's like I was real quiet as a mouse, being excited about going into the theater. And we got in there, and my cousin and my brother were roughhousing. And I told my uncle, I said, hey, look, I want to get some popcorn and soda. So he gives me money, and of course they want something. And they're like, be quiet. You're being loud. You're not getting anything. So I go up to the concession stand. I see this big black door that's cracked open about 4 inches. So I stick my face in. And this big grizzly guy opens the door real quick and says, what are you doing in here? And I said, I was just wondering what this was. And he says, come take a look. And he opened, it was a carbon arc lamp house. He opens up the lamp house, and it was the sun in a box. I mean, that was the brightest light I've ever seen in my life at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And he shows me they're running the preview reels and the concession reels, and he's showing me how the projector works and everything. And I go in, I get my popcorn and soda, and I'm thinking to myself, it's like, I'm going back to the car, and I was like, they're going to want some. My brother's going to want some. And I get there, my uncle says, "What took so long?" And I said, "Well, I was looking at the projection booth. It was really neat." So he picks me up, puts me on top of the car, gives me a blanket, gives me a speaker, hands me my soda and popcorn. Says, "Okay, you can sit up there, but you've got to be real still." I said, "Okay." So I am sitting on the top of the car with a blanket, a soda, a popcorn, a speaker, and this massive screen.
Yeah.
What show were we going to see? It was 1971. First run, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Wow, stop it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember it like it was yesterday. They had a preview, though, of course, the preview reel was running, and then they had a cartoon. I even remember the cartoon. The cartoon was called Ben and Me. It was a Disney Bona Vista. That was one of their sub studios. It was Bona Vista. It was called Ben and Me, and it was about a little field mouse that moved in with Ben Franklin.
I remember this.
Yeah, and taught, was part of everything that Ben Franklin was inventing and all that stuff. I still remember. I just found it, as a matter of fact. I just found it online, and I'm trying to get a copy for my own archives.
35?
Oh, no.
Oh,
something on video.
Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be. Oh, if you kidding? If you could show that before the opening weekend movie,
you'd shed a tear, right? We're gonna sit you up on the car hood.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that'll launch you into a love,
So you fast forward 8 more years. I'm 16 years old. My neighbor says, "Hey, I work at the Arcadia," and I was living in Kerrville, Texas at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, "Do you want to come up and maybe apply for a job or take a look?" And I said, "Sure." We went right up to the booth, and he says, "Check this out." And he opens up the lamp house. He strikes up the carbons, and it was a carbon arc lamp house, and he opens it up. Boom, the sun in the box. I was like, and it all came screaming back to me, all those memories. I was like, I think I figured out where I'm supposed to be.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I absolutely feel incredibly fortunate that I was able to find my groove as far as theater goes at a very young age, my niche in life, and I've been riding it ever since.
So did you jump in headlong? Did you get kind of the ground floor jobs at theaters? How did that all start?
Oh yeah, taking tickets, selling projection first.
Really? I love that.
Oh yeah, projection first. But my buddy was he was teaching me how to do it. He didn't tell me, but he wanted to quit. So he was teaching me how to take over, so he'd go do this other job that he wanted to do.
It's like a secret, apprenticeship, so he could get on out of town.
Yeah, and he was hoping that I'd really like doing it because he really wanted to leave. I was like, okay, well, have fun. See you later. You don't want to do it anymore. The very first movie that I professionally projected was Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
All right.
You couldn't script it better.
The very next weekend was Urban Cowboy.
And this was an indoor, right? I take it?
This was an indoor theater with peerless carbon arc lamp houses, simplex projectors with the sound heads, and an old RCA tube amplifier system. This thing was original.
Yeah.
Completely original. They had the old RCA speakers in the back with the really big bass bins and the really big horns, and it was a beautiful old theater. As a matter of fact, I've been keeping tabs on it, and they just completely refurbished it about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Wow. That's a rare treat. Normally, it's the other story that you hear where it's like, nobody wanted to invest into it, shifted into something else,
Yeah, let's turn it into apartments.
Well, how does one kind of work their way into
A booth at a young age? How did you prove your prowess? Is there kind of a hazing stage where it's like, all right, if you can cross this bridge holding the canisters, we'll let you.
Yeah, if I can carry the canisters up the stairs to the booth.
Yes. Gotta see if this dude's fit.
I got along with everybody, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it got to the point where, of course, I misthreaded a couple times. When I'd forget to change a carbon, then I'd have to turn it off, open it up, switch it out real quick, try not to burn my hand. But it got to the point where I made it a goal to make my presentations as flawless as possible.
You took real pride in it.
Absolutely. And I mean, people notice that too.
Yeah.
If they don't say anything when they leave, you nailed it.
Well, such a it's the old saying, I guess, now, because we've mentioned it so many times, but it's, if they're doing their job right, they're invisible. And it's a weird position, because normally in this day and age, everybody wants their instant gratification and this and that. It's like, nope, I know my job is well done if nobody says a word. I am the invisible master,
Yeah. So that was 1979, 1980, and then the next thing I did is they had a problem with the roof. Part of the roof leaked, and they didn't know it, and it collapsed. But it wasn't a situation where just part of the roof over the audience, where the stage is, just kind of fell down. It didn't fall all the way in or anything, but it closed the theater down for a season at the time. And so that is when I went over to the Bolero drive-in in Kerrville, Texas, and threw my hat in the ring there.
Again, it's a calling, in a sense. Something happened to steer you in a certain direction,
Oh yeah, it's like, call it fate, anything you want.
That's right.
But there, I had to work my way up. I started out a concession, learned how to cook, run concession, cook pop popcorn, and got pretty fluent at it. So it was a lot of fun. But having the people come in and just getting their food prepped and ready to go, and getting them in and out as quickly as possible so they can go see the show. And then the projectionist started getting ill. He was elderly, but he started getting ill. And I said, I know how to run projectors. And of course, I go upstairs, and there's like xenon bulbs and automatic transfers and 6,000 totally different.
Different world.
Yeah, absolutely different, from going from a tube sound system to a solid state system. So kind of like I had to relearn everything all over again, but not. I had the basics, so that definitely helped.
And around what year would this have been?
That 1980.
80. So still 80. And tell us about the Bolero drive-in, because I'm just fascinated by any and all drive-ins I've never been to. Was single screen, paved?
Single screen, unpaved, with the mounds, with the speakers. And like I said, I started from concession. I used to clean the lot every morning. Like, as soon as I got off school on Friday, I'd come out. I had a 72 El Camino, and I'd throw two 55-gallon barrels in the back and just go around and clean up all the trash. And then I dump those, drop them off again, start cooking hamburgers. Then I'd go turn on the sound. They taught me how to turn on the sound system, because I was the guy who had to go around and make sure all the speakers worked. And I had to do that every day. So I definitely got my steps in a very young age.
What would you say the car capacity there was at the time?
Well, like 400. It was decent. It had a big V-shaped marquee. And they taught me how to change the letters and how to change all the bulbs. Told me that I had to be careful, because if the timer was early and the neon came on, that I wouldn't get shocked. That was fun. Because it happened. I got shocked a couple of times, because you're just putting the letter up, and then your elbow is near the piece of it, and it's like, I was like, oh, darn it. But yeah, it's like, moved on up and completely knew how to fix all the speakers. Got a real good education on how a 70-volt system works for sound systems with those speakers. You name it. I mean, you literally got to do everything. Howard Hegel, Mr. Hegel, was the manager. I remember his name, working for him for all those years. It was 2 years, and then I ended up moving back up to Delaware, and then that's when I started working. Now, before I moved to Texas, I still lived in Delaware and would go to, Pleasant Hill Drive-In, Naaman's Drive-In, Newark Drive-In, 141 Drive-In, but it closed rather early when I was really young. But when I came back, they were all closed.
Oh man.
Yeah. Just like that.
They're just like that. They were all closed up. It was interesting, because the Naaman's Drive-In their field was in Delaware, but the screen was in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It was right on the line.
I helped reopen that drive-in. Yep, I know what you mean.
Okay, so you could be on the swing set, and when you'd swing one way, you're in PA. Swing the other way, you're in Delaware.
Yeah. Very unusual drive-in right next to the railroad tracks.
Yeah. And we heard the train go by. I remember that too. So then I started working back into an indoor theater at the State Theater, which is by the University of Delaware. And then I bounced around. I just, worked at the State Theater until it closed. And then I went up to I was at the Sam Eric up on 202. Jeff, do you remember that one?
Yeah, vaguely, yes. Yep, I never ran it, but I remember going by it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked up there for, I don't know, a couple of months, and then it ended up closing. So I didn't necessarily get the reputation, but I felt like I was cursed because every time I work at a theater, it ended up closing.
It was just the times, my friend. Just the times.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, did that theater close due to just dwindling attendance or other factors?
Well, Sam Eric was bought out, and they only kept the theaters that they wanted. Then AMC was in the process of possibly building the Painters Crossing one, which is there now, because they were building all new shopping centers and whatnot. I don't know if they were renting the property or if they owned it or not, but it was it's a lot of shifting was going on at those times as far as ownerships and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. Corporate ownerships, this and that.
Budco was bought out by AMC, and Eric was bought out by United Artists, I think.
Yes. As a matter of fact, it was. And then it was just a matter of, picking and choosing, because some of the other theaters I worked at were the Triangle Mall and Castle Mall Twin, which had older, they were Japanese 35 millimeters. They were massive. These things were huge. I learned how to run those. Just to give you a list of theaters, because I had to put one together. The Kerrville 4, when I was still in Texas, that was a brief snit of time. Bolero, State Theater, Sam Eric, Triangle Castle Mall, General Cinemas at the Christiana Mall, the Everett Theater in Middletown, Elkton 4, the Delaware Art Museum and the Delaware History Museum had 35 millimeter projection systems in them as well.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, I came in to work on their sound system because I started getting diverse and working in live entertainment as well. So I learned how to do sound engineering for live entertainment, lighting for live entertainment. I started working for theaters, or a lot of live entertainment theaters. But the Delaware History Museum, when I was in there working on their sound system, I was talking about the projectors. They called me up and said, "Hey, we have somebody that wants to come in and run a 35 millimeter." And I said, "Okay." And he says, "Will they do it?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely." I said, "Can you do it?" I said, "Sure." Came in, checked out the print. The print was Treasure Island, that was done or directed by Charlton Heston's son. And he was in it. He was Long John Silver. And, the night of the premiere came in, and I knew that he was going to be there. But the next thing I know, I walked down the booth steps, opened the door. Boom. There's Charlton Heston.
Wow. Come on.
Standing right there. And I was like, "Hi, sir. How you doing?" So I got his autograph and a picture, and I showed his son's movie, and we ended up watching it together, and it was fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those stories, the storied history. Were all of these theaters, I take it, 35 millimeter at a certain point, or projection focused at a certain point as far as your involvement? Or were you like sound tech?
I ended up pretty much becoming a repair tech for a lot of these places.
Yeah. So
then would fill in wherever I could. The interesting thing about this is I sat down and somebody asked me to make a list of the theaters I worked at before, and I wrote it all down. And then it dawned on me. If I ever applied for a job and I put all this down, anybody who's in the biz would be, "Wow, this is a really cool resume." But if I went to an HR person, their first thought is, "Boy, you really can't hold a job, can you?"
Well, it's one of those things. You are kind of service-based where, as you said, the need for you grows. Sometimes opportunities come a knocking, and, that puts you in all sorts of different places.
Oh, yeah. Everywhere.
Which, I mean, having the experience under your belt all these years, you gain that clout. And, again, going back to the fascination of the 70 millimeter in general,
Mhm.
you get called upon when there is a 70 millimeter release of a title like an Oppenheimer most recently,
Mhm.
um, and they need a projectionist. How does one get on this, I take it, short list? And what is that process? Because again, we assume that, you're getting a letter by pigeon, and this is a very kind of secret club.
Well, there's a special bat signal that shows a 70 on the clouds. So, oh
I
wait,
love
I wasn't supposed to say that. That's right.
I'll cut that out.
Now we all know. Yeah.
That's great.
So now I got a call from a guy in Baltimore named Carl, and he was looking for people that had 70 millimeter projectionists. Carl was the president of the Projectionists Union in Baltimore. Now, the IATSE is the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees and Moving Motion Picture Operators. But the moving motion picture operators sort of fell off because as everything got automated, they stopped having projectionists in booths. But he was actually kept his local, and he had about 8 members. And when he was contacted by Boston Light and Sound about looking for projectionists to do 70 millimeter, he started making. Now he's been up here working in the performing arts theater that I work at now a few years ago, and we never ever talked about film. So when he was reaching out looking for people, our business rep said, "Hey, Bob, he's the theater guy, he's the movie guy in Delaware." So he reached out and then had me connect with Boston Light and Sound and asked me if I wanted to do the 70 millimeter version of The Hateful Eight in Annapolis, Maryland. And I said, sure. Now, mind you, it's been 15, no, I guess more like 20 years now since I've operated 70, because that was at the Tri-State Mall, which was, a matter of fact, right, literally walking distance from where the Naaman's drive-in used to be. So they had 2 twin Century 70s. So I had to do reel to reel when I did that. Oh gosh, that was years ago too. And I said, yeah, I have 70 millimeter experience. Is it a magnetic strip sound head? And they said, no, it's DTS, which is all digital. The soundtrack is all digital and it plays off a file. But the film is film. You have to put it on a platter.
Yeah.
These things weigh a couple of 100 pounds and they are twice as fat as a 70 millimeter. But I was in Annapolis, Maryland for The Hateful Eight about 5 years ago. And then a year and a half later, they asked me if I wanted to run Dunkirk. And I said, okay, am I going back to Annapolis? They said, no, we didn't. We're not going in. We're doing a more limited release. So you have your choice. They gave me 5 theaters to pick from. So I went to Miami, Florida.
Come on. Why not?
Yep.
I mean, if you get the choice, huh?
Miami, Florida, here I come. So went to Miami, Florida, went through the whole gambit, put the film on the platter, ran my test reels and everything, and was there for about 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Dunkirk in Miami, Florida, it did okay.
Yeah.
Then they called me up and said, hey, can you go somewhere else? And I'm like, sure. And they said, we want to ship you over to Houston, Texas, because the guy who's there can't stay. And I said, let's go. So I hopped on a plane, went to Houston, Texas, and was there for another 2.5 weeks, continuing the run of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And then left there, came back, got another call from Boston Light and Sound. Hey, we're doing Oppenheimer. Oh, actually, that's not true. Well, that is true. But I got a call earlier asking me if I wanted to do a 70 millimeter version of Ready Player One.
Right.
Because there are prints, 70 millimeter prints of Ready Player One, because it never got released to do the movie thing, but I was on board to be able to do that. And then they called me back and asked me if I wanted to do Oppenheimer. And I said, sure. Now it was only supposed to be for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, sure. So I get down there, get everything set up exactly the way I'd left it from the last time.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, it's like, put it on the platter. And after the first weekend, complete sellout. Every single performance, complete sellout.
Yeah. Oppenheimer became Oppenheimer.
Yep. And then the next thing you know, they called me up and says, "Can you stay another week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I suppose." And that was on Sunday. And on Tuesday, they called me back and says, "Well, can you stay to the end of the month?" I said, "Well, I am staying to the end of the month." I said, "No, this was in July. I got down there on July 15th. And they were asking me if I could stay to the end of July. And I said, "I'm already staying till the end of July." And he says, "Oh, no, we want you to stay till the end of August."
Wow, come on.
Oh, wow.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that much time, but let me check.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I finagled some comp time to be able to use up in all my vacation.
Yeah.
And ended up running Oppenheimer 127 times. I was working 14 and a half hours a day. And I ran the equivalent of 321 miles of film.
Unbelievable.
That means I could stretch from where I was all the way to North Carolina in film.
You're like, I had the time. I did the math.
That's
Well, when
great.
you're sitting in a booth for 6 weeks, 14 hours a day, you start coming up with different things you can do. I actually went around their booth and cleaned their entire booth. And I went around, I cleaned their booth, I put all their stuff away, and I pulled stuff out that they had. It was interesting enough because when they switched from 35 millimeter to video to digital, the people just kind of left everything. And now this was when I was there the first time. Now, when I came back, they had cleaned a lot of it out, but they still had a lot of stuff that they needed to get rid of. And it wasn't really stuff that you could use. It was just pieces of like floor bases from the platters or just a single platter. You know,
I found that at a lot of the theaters I've been in. It seems like it's all right. We're done with this. No need to even, bother.
Yeah, it's at that point it's scrap metal. There is literally nothing you could use it for.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Houston,
wow.
Houston, Texas, I just all over the place. And these are beautiful machines. I was just elated when I got the call to do this. The fact that they're still doing these films, these motion pictures on film, especially 70 millimeter.
That's crazy. The idea, to have the opportunity to not only show these films, but go all over the place and, the status kind of going for you as well. You never really know what's going to happen depending on how popular a movie's going to be. It's very cool.
Okay, now out of the 127 presentations, there was one of them that didn't quite go well. I started noticing that the image was kind of creeping down the screen a little. Like this was literally day 2.
Yeah.
I was like, this doesn't seem right. So I'm adjusting the levelers on the bottom of the projector to get it back where it was. And then I literally stepped away from the projector, and then the manager comes flying up into the booth, says, "Bob," I'm like, "What?" He goes, "The image." I'm like, "What about it?" "It's in the audience." I'm like, "What?" So I ran over, and the locking bolts, the tilt bolts that hold the projector at the angle to be able to hit the screen, vibrated loose.
Oh boy.
And the entire projector lurched forward, and the image is all over the audience.
Oh my gosh. 70 millimeter puts you in the movie.
Yeah. Quite literally. I was like, wow. Now, this is the thing I really have to stop saying. The manager's like, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, go ahead and switch." We had the video, the digital version of Oppenheimer playing at a 20-second or 20-minute delay. And that way it would just, because they wanted to run it at the same time. I said, no, because if I have a problem, you can switch it over without having to try to find the spot if we're missing 5, 8, 10 minutes while I try to at least fix it. And they said, okay. So there was a 20-minute delay, and they actually got to see the rest of the film. But I just grabbed the projector and I yanked on it really hard, and I shot it up. And when I did, I couldn't get it to stabilize. So I just shut it off, and I said, go ahead and run digital.
Yeah.
So then a run to Home Depot, pick up some new bolts with some lock washers, and I did it all over again. Fixed it all up.
You never know what you're going to get. Wow. Wow. Well, knowing the history, and everybody hearing the history, your long history, I'm curious, what are some of the big differences running a indoor versus outdoor? And Jeff, I'm sure, could shine a light on all this too.
Well,
Mhm.
actually, with I've listened to many of the podcasts, and I absolutely like treasure Jeff's opinion about the way that you guys run Mahoning Drive-In. Jeff has said this multiple times. I've heard it say him on multiple occasions. You have one screen, you have everybody facing the same way, you have one presentation where you can everybody is together and they're all experiencing the same thing. They are building excitement within themselves to be able to see what it is that they came to see. And of course, coming through the projection booth and everything is a huge treat. I mean, I love just sitting there talking to Jeff and watching, looking at people as they poke their head, and I'm like, come on in. It's not even my theater. Come on in, take a look, take pictures.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. But one of the things that I've discovered when I was even running Oppenheimer it was an AMC 24 in Miami, Florida. They had Barbie and they had Oppenheimer, and they were starting the movie every 15 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Every 15 minutes you can find one of the theaters starting the movie. It's turned into a convenience. That's one of the things that a lot of people, that I know that a lot of people are attracted to your theater, is that it is a presentation. It is an excitement. It is electricity. It's everything wrapped into one.
Right.
How about on a technical side?
A technical side?
Yeah, I mean, as far as somebody who's lived in the booth for so long.
Yeah, I lived in the booth for 6 weeks. I would see somebody come up in the projection booth once every 3 or 4 days. Everything's completely automated. They go to the manager's office to program the show times. Nobody comes into the booth.
Right. Yeah.
I made a joke. I said, "You guys want to at least stop by once a day just to make sure I'm still breathing?" I said, "I'm getting up there in age."
Yeah.
There's really no reason to go into the booth anymore. It's a shame.
No, there isn't. There's absolutely isn't. I mean, everything is just completely automated.
Yeah. Well, before I turn it over to the guys, another kind of curious question. What are some of the biggest challenges between running 35 mil and 70 millimeter?
It's just bigger, heavier, and it doesn't cooperate as well. 35, you can do a couple of things with your wrist to be able to get the film itself in a position to be able to either thread, put it on a reel, keep it off, even keep it off the floor by putting a wrap or two around your arm. But the 70 millimeter is just so much heavier that it's something. Well, for instance, what they did was, now the platter system, it's on one big reel. Interesting history from what I understand about how the platter system was created. Two projectionists were sitting on their back porch. Sounds like the beginning of a joke. We're sitting on the back porch drinking a beer, and they're like, how can we make our job easier? And they literally have their elbow on one of those old steel metal patio tables. So they started looking at the patio table, and it's 5 feet. I said, I wonder if we could put this on the patio table and make it spin, and then feed it from the center and wrap it up. And that's, from what I understand, how the concept for the platter system was created.
Wow.
Needless to say, they put 50% of the projectionists in the union out of work within one fell swoop. But this thing there was never any 70 millimeter platters built, except of course for IMAX, for 70 millimeter. There was only on for 35. So they had to adapt the 35 millimeter platters to hold 70.
Yeah.
And you can see some of the modifications they made, but the brain, which is the feed mechanism that goes in the center of the projector, was the biggest modification that they had to make in order for the film to be able to run through all the pulleys to go through the projector and then wind up back on itself again.
When did that shift happen? As far as the platter system kind of overtaking the reel-to-reel?
The platter, about mid-'80s, when it really caught on, because it went from reel-to-reel 20-minute reels, 2,000-foot reels, to 6,000-foot reels, so you can only have to make one changeover. And then it went to platter systems, xenon bulbs. When the xenon lamps came out, that's when the industry really took off, because that way you don't have to worry about buying carbons. Carbon rods are these little brass rods that have a carbon-filled core. They're about, I don't know, Jeff, what, 3/8, quarter inch? How big?
Yeah, that's one of the sizes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They ranged in size. Yeah. That's one of the common ones.
They would work like a arc welder. You bang them together, and it would produce an electrical arc, which was ridiculously bright.
Yeah.
And that's how they would use light to project the film. And all of the light with a reflector got concentrated on the aperture where the film went through the projector. And then the xenon bulb came in, and you have 2,000 hours of use on one lamp to be able to produce light for the projector. So the automation just started taking over after that.
Naturally.
How long, pardon me if you already said it, how long would you get on a carbon rod?
3 reels if you're lucky.
Oh, they would
Yeah,
change them that often.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about right. Yeah, for a positive rod, you get about 3. Negative rod, you'd get about 5.
So you were swapping those out nonstop all night.
Yeah, every changeover, you had to open the lamp house and readjust the rods and separate them because they would feed together. Both sides would feed together and keep in one spot in front of the reflector.
It's another world, you know.
It was a trip.
Mm-hmm.
I'll turn it over to you guys. I'm sure you got plenty of questions, relatable questions. Mark, you got anything for Bob?
Well, a couple things. One is something I've never asked a projectionist before, but we'll do that in a second. Other than the ones you've already mentioned, are there any films over your history that were really memorable that you projected due to they were a big deal, or anything that just stands out that you remember projecting for some reason?
Well, The Howling, the movie The Howling we showed at the Bolero Drive-In was probably the only film that we had there that was a complete sellout. The first thing that happened is ticket person wasn't paying attention to how many tickets they were selling and oversold the lot. Like cars were looking for spots and there weren't any.
Yeah.
And oversold it by like 20 cars. And there was still a line. So then we had to turn that away. But the most memorable part, and it was during this, in the early part when they started selling the tickets, this guy pulls up in a pickup truck, a dual wheel, 4-door. And it was it was a beautiful big black truck. So, and he had a bunch of lumber in the back. So he pulls up, goes down the lane, comes up, and then parks with the back end facing the screen in the back row. So now we're in Texas. We're in Kerrville, Texas, it's summertime. It's hot, period. So he gets out and he's in his shorts and he starts taking the lumber out of his truck. And I'm like, is this, I'm looking like the projection booth for the Bolero was on top of the concession stand. So I had the big window in the front, and then if you looked out the left window, you saw the box office, and you could see this guy pulling up. So the next thing you know, he throws the boards off, and then he pulls out a cooler and then a couple of inner tubes. I'm like, well, it's going to be comfortable. But I noticed that after he pulled the boards out, he had lined the bed of his truck with a swimming pool liner and filled it full of water.
Come on.
And he turned the bed of his truck into a little swimming pool, and he put in his inner tube and the inner tube with a cooler and was splashing around, and he parked in the middle. We had to tell him to move because we sold so many seats, so many spots. He had a speaker on he was in stereo. He was a speaker on either side of his bed of his truck watching the movie.
I love it.
That's great.
Rolling in style.
Rolling in style. And it's like, it was funny because The Howling was in the earlier part of the season. He came back like 4 or 5 times. Mr. Hegel is like, oh, he can't do that. I'm like, why not? It's like, he paid for a ticket. Sure. So, and they ended up, that was the most memorable. The Howling was the most memorable. The other thing is, I was in high school when I worked for the Bolero. We were in a town that only had one high school, and it was a massive high school. So I knew a lot of the people that would go to the drive-in. And my job after I started the movie was to walk around and make sure that nobody was doing anything they weren't supposed to. There was never a time when I walked out of there with less than a 6-pack of beer, different brands, mind you, but less than a 6-pack of beer from people saying, hey, don't tell anybody. I threw them in my car. But when The Howling was there, I think I wound up with 2 cases.
It's the convenient tip, right? like it doesn't make it counteractive. You want the show to go well, so hopefully it was after the presentation.
Oh, totally after the presentation. And then I'd go around and have to, there'd be 3 or 4 cars still there after the movie's over, and they fell asleep. So you have to go over and knock on the door. or knock on the window. And then you kind of very carefully approach the ones where the windows were all steamed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So you got to tell me, has that happened at your theater?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Jeff's told the classic story of going up and
I knocked on the glass. Girl rolled the window down. She was on top of him, and she just whips her head over her shoulder and goes, "We'll be done in a minute." Okay. Absolutely true. And so I walk back to the projection booth, and about 5 minutes later, I hear this car start up, and sure enough, there they go.
Perfect.
JT's told us a couple stories of walking up in character on some interesting acts. Yeah, it's the drive-in.
He's dressed as Jason at Camp Blood. He's going to knock on a window and scare somebody, and he winds up being the one who gets a surprise. Happened more than a few times, from what I'm told.
Yeah, wonderful.
So, as a projectionist, I've never asked anybody this because it just occurred to me. So, you're around the film that's running. You have to check it. You're looking out the window. You're seeing it. You're hearing it the whole time. Do you ever then watch the movie, or does that just ruin it for you because you've kind of half experienced it 100 times already? Can you ever then sit and watch it, or is it just like you try to go and watch a film that you haven't projected?
Well, the best part about a lot of the single screen indoor old theaters I used to work at, as soon as you open the door to the projection booth, you step down into an aisle and there was a seat there all the way in the back row in the balcony. And nobody ever sat in that area. So I could open the door and after I do a changeover and just sit and actually do watch the movie. And of course, like everything else, and I know you guys do it too, because I've seen you do it. After you've seen it a couple of times, then you start finding mistakes or you find bloopers or you start critiquing the film a little bit more. I had to actually watch Oppenheimer at home to be able to see the entire thing.
Amazing. You ran it how many times again?
127 times. So it wasn't until I watched it at home when I actually was able to see, because the first 8 to 10 minutes, I'm literally checking the focus. And I clean the lens before I even start the film. I do the whole thread up and everything, make sure that the window is clean. And then I go down and I check volume. I check the image, especially since the thing wound up in the audience. I checked it literally every single showing. So I would definitely get some exercise, because the where the theater projection booth was on the opposite side where the doors are that would let you in. So for the audience, I would miss the first 10, even up to 15 minutes of the film, just making sure that the presentation is as good as I can get it.
It's funny because, people assume, they're running it. They must be able to watch the movies, How many pieces of movies, Jeff, do you know? It's like, I've seen it, quote unquote.
As far as, the difference between the indoor and the drive-in, as I said before, everybody's watching the same thing and everybody's coming in. Even as of late, I opened up the Bear Drive-In in Bear, Delaware 2 years ago. And I was hoping to get a couple of years out of it. It was a temporary setup for, I wouldn't necessarily say a pop-up drive-in because I was really trying to make it permanent, but I used cargo containers to build a screen and the concession stand in the booth. And just everybody that found out that it was there was coming in and enjoying as much of a drive-in experience as that I could give them. And they did, and they got it, and they absolutely loved it. And they came in, and it's like I had a company call me from a security company call me and say, "Hey, do you need security?" I'm like, well, the owner wanted me to have like a police officer on site, on Fridays and Saturdays. And the police officer came like 2 times on the first weekend we were open and said, you're fine. This is, we'll patrol, but we're not really going to be as a presence because we don't want anybody to think that, oh my gosh, there's a problem. And I said, I love you guys. That's fantastic. But, we were open for 12 weeks and we didn't have any issues other than a car that wouldn't start at the end of the night. Or there was one particular, we were selling out literally after the 6th week we were open, we were selling out every new performance. We only had 200 cars, but the first weekend we sold out, we ran out of popcorn. I had to go over to the grocery store and buy a bunch. stuff like that.
Well, I guess it's kind of makes total sense to talk about the current outing. You kind of brushed on it. What's the situation now with the theater you're running currently?
Well, the drive-in was on a property that was being developed, and I had a 2-year lease. However, the plans for the property itself was a 65-acre plot of land that was really long and skinny, and I was literally on the right side end, all by myself. It was a field, and on the opposite side, they activated their permits to be able to start putting in the big catch basin, because they were putting in a couple of strip centers, a park, some apartment complexes. I mean, they had the entire property planned out. However, they had the entire property planned out under one set of permits. We got what was known as a red line, where we drew over their plans to say, we're going to use this property temporarily for this thing, this drive-in. The county was all for it. They were doing everything they could to make it happen. However, when he activated the permits to start the construction, I got a cease and desist letter 2 weeks before we were going to close. This was mid-October. And I called the owner and I said, what's going on? He says, well, we activated this, but we didn't think it would cause you any problems because you're literally on the other side of the lot. I called the county. I said, what's going on? They said, we can't extend your red line anymore because they activated the permits, construction, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, let me ask you this. Can't you just give me a waiver? And you can't miss a beat and you can't make this up. The county said, their response, well, if we give you a waiver, that means we got to give everybody a waiver. I'm like, no, you don't. I said, you don't have to give anybody a waiver, and I respect that. But the economic impact that I'm having on this area is tremendous. And it's giving families something to do, and we're giving it at a great price. That there was a losing battle. But like I said, it was 2 weeks before we were cease and desist 2 weeks before we were actually going to close. And I said, just out of curiosity, if we keep going, what's the fine? They said $25. I said, okay, how long do I have to pay it and stop operating? He goes, 2 weeks. I said, okay, here's my $25. He goes, well, we haven't fined you yet. I said, well, let me know when you do. They never did.
Consider it a prepayment.
That is great.
that worked out really well.
I guess that led to the indoor situation you're doing now?
Yes. I have a partner that I'm working with. Her name is Bev Zimmerman, and she let me know that a building had a space that they wanted to turn into a multifunction theater. The building itself, and you know this as well as I do, a lot of buildings are going through the changes, especially after COVID, of just not filling the space with workers. So they're trying to diverse, and they brought in a food court. They're doing a whole lot of different events in the lobby. The lobby's a big, beautiful lobby. And we went ahead and said, okay, well, let's build this theater in this space. But they kept delaying it because of one thing or another. But they had these two multifunction rooms that they weren't using at all. And I said, can we just take these over and turn these into a movie theater? They said, sure. So we ended up we do art and indie films on the weekend. And we do, like tomorrow, as a matter of fact, I'm working a private corporate rental all day. So nice and diverse. And we do we do DCP, digital film. And, knock on wood, it had, it's not anything I'm going to be able to retire off of, but it's definitely holding its own.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Every time we check in with each other, it seems like you're just getting over another successful show, and it's great to hear. You deserve it.
Thank you. The full-time job is technical director at the Playhouse, which is a performing arts touring house for Broadway shows.
I imagine they'll be calling you if they need more 7mm in the future. They'll be calling you too.
I can't say what they are, but there is another film in the pipeline.
Oh boy, see, it's another one of those secret, you can't.
Well, it's literally an email that says, what are you doing this summer?
Oh,
that's it. What are you doing this summer?
Yeah.
And I said, pretty open, available. What's going on? Future emails will let you know. When they do this, they keep it really tight-lipped. They have to.
And I guess that's a good segue to you, Jeff, if you have any questions for Bob.
No, the guys did a great job with their questions. I enjoyed this immensely. I really did.
I did too. Now we were talking about stories. I have a Mahoning story that was really funny when I was up there a few months ago.
Okay.
And it involves Virgil, and it involves Virgie as well.
Oh, I love it.
Ah,
So I'm down at the video booth, and I'm talking to Virgil, and we're just chit-chatting about something. And Virgie's running around. There's this little girl running around. And I looked at him. I said, "What? It's Virgie have a girlfriend?" And I don't know. And just playing and everything. Then all of a sudden, it seemed that Virgie may have had to, nature called. You know where I'm going with this.
It happens.
He remembers.
Yep.
So Virgie decides to whip his pants down all the way to his ankles and relieve himself in the front row.
Let's be clear that Virgie is like 4 years old and not one of
4
your
years
standard
old.
employees.
Yes. Probably a good note to take. But yeah, he's very free when it comes to his trainings on the lot. Literal trainings on the lot.
And so Nancy's out by the camper walking towards the video booth, and you say, "You see what your son is doing?" And she didn't miss a beat. He didn't get that from me. Oh, I was crying. I was laughing so hard. And there's Virgil. He's like, nothing's phasing him. And then he just pulls his pants up, goes running around again.
Yep, just a drive-in boy, doing his drive-in thing. Yeah, that's why I love you, Bob. There really are endless memories together, and that's really the big thing that I cherish more than anything over the years here at the drive-in is just those long-lasting, supporting lasting friendships. It's what it's all about, my friend. And even already we're talking about some fun plans for the new year. So we can't wait to have you back, which I'm sure will be sooner than later. Time stamping this a little bit. We're rolling into the 2024 season, and every single year we come in, do that little prep, making sure everything's looking good. Anything that needs addressing gets addressed, and you're a big part of that now.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And I am definitely looking forward to coming in.
So we ask everybody on the podcast, almost everybody, obviously running the drive-in double feature is part of the game. If you were to have the ability to program any double feature at the Mahoning or any drive-in, where does your head go and why?
Well, interestingly enough, you've already got opening night taken care of.
I guess Wonka would have to be in there, right?
Oh yeah. If you did not have that is definitely, the pairing itself would be something that I would definitely recommend, hands down, without a doubt. But you already do that. So great minds think alike, I guess. I don't know. But if we were to go the rest of the week or weekend, I should say, I'm a really big old classic disaster film guy. And I used to love all the old Irwin Allen productions, like Towering Inferno, Earthquake, Poseidon Adventure,
the disasters,
the big disasters, and how are we going to get out of this and all live?
That's right.
Oh wait, it's a movie. You all live anyway. No, just kidding. But yeah, we've got, and then of course I would go. There's just lots of genres, but I guess if I had to pick a few, of course, when was the last time you guys did Princess Bride?
It's actually been quite a while. We played it for the wedding that came in, our very first wedding, and I think actually one of the weddings to follow. But publicly, gosh, it's been a long time. You're getting me thinking maybe it's due.
Maybe it's due. Yeah, because I love, of course, the 50s classics, and even the classics that are 50s esque oriented, like
the callback.
Rebel Without a Cause, American Graffiti.
Yep.
And I love the mashup they did with It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
I love that movie.
Yeah. But one of the things, one particular genre that I steer towards a lot of, not so much anime, but animation. Like Last Unicorn, Fire and Ice, like the 80s stuff, American pop, heavy metal. Heavy metal's a good one.
Hell yeah.
Roger Rabbit, Secrets of Nim, and even if you want to go with Labyrinth and Dark Crystal.
Yeah, I love that idea.
In that direction a little bit. And then, but one thing I'd really like to see, like maybe even on a Sunday or a Tuesday, would be like a bunch of old black and whites. And I mean, like even going back to like Buster Keaton, Fatty Arbuckle, Theda Bara, Douglas Fairbanks, Errol Flynn, Clara Bow. I mean, just some really old time classic stuff.
Dig into the silent stuff. We always gone back and forth on whether it'll work, you know. It's one of those things. It's like meant for an indoor house, but
yeah,
if anything, you know, the Mahonings become very much a film school at times, and shining a light on that important era that we love so much. We'll get there, I'm sure, eventually. You know.
Oh yeah,
those are some bangers, baby.
That's my jam. To coin an old phrase, those are my jams.
I love it. Well, we always want to give everybody the opportunity as well to promote anything that they got going on. I know you got the theater going. Anywhere people can go to get the info, check you out, support you.
The interesting thing is about this website is thescreeningroom.org. The fact that we even have that was amazing.
How did you get that?
Thescreeningroom.org. It's ours, and it was available, so we got it.
Boom.
But we're the Screening Room at 1313. Oh, and we changed up things a little bit. When we first got there, we had a lot of the corporate seats that you would see at a corporate offices and whatnot. But we were trying to figure out, okay, can we get some theater seats and maybe put some bases on them and you know, populate the theater with those? And somebody suggested, hey, why don't you try some like couches and love seats? So we put a couple. Now we had these gray armchairs, and we decided just like, well, let's put a couple rows in and see what happens. Everybody gravitated towards the couches.
Naturally, if you got the choice.
So we started hitting all the thrift shops, and we started hitting all the resale shops and the refurbished shops, and we literally populated the entire theater with couches and love seats.
That's cool.
Now the biggest problem that I have is we are literally building a brand new theater. We're going to end up with 3 screens. We're going to build a brand new theater, and we've already purchased some used, literally 3-year-old seating that came out of a theater that closed, that didn't make it through COVID, and it opened up brand new right before COVID hits, shut down, you know, boom, they ended up not making it, and they had to sell everything. So we picked up their seats at a really good price. The high back, they're not the recliners, but they rock, and they have the cup holders, the whole 9 yards. So the biggest problem that we have is the customers are coming up and asking us, hey, when you build a new theater, are you going to have it full of couches like this one?
They want it now?
They want the couches. I was like, what a problem to have.
The luxury, you know, they're like, you guys should market this in a way. It's like, you know, change it from the screening room to the, you know, the living room. Are you guys renting this space out on a monthly? Because I'm very comfortable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just come on in, relax. Oh, and we have a liquor license.
Oh, well, that helps, baby. You know, leg up.
Beer and wine.
Cheers to that. Well, man, nobody else deserves success better than you. You've been so supportive over the years. Your help with everything and continued support with everything. It means the world to us. So thank you from the bottom of the heart, from the whole entire team.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And whatever you do not stop doing it. You are nailing it. You are nailing it bigger and better than anything I've ever seen out there.
Thank you so much. I saw a great quote today. Somebody shared one of our posts and said, you know, it's one of the great modern success stories in theatrical history. And you sit back and think about it, and it really has defied the odds, and the support that we get and things like that really do fuel the fire. So thank you.
My pleasure. I'm definitely looking forward to coming up. We'll pick a date and figure out when you want to put all the stuff back in and fire it up and get it ready to go.
Absolutely, baby. 2024. Good. You guys all have a lot to look forward to. And stay tuned for a lot more fun here on the podcast. And on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.